Do you miss those lost African-American breakfasts your grandparents knew? They fueled busy mornings with sizzling skillets and sweet syrup memories. What tasty history are we still chasing today? Hot water cornbread cakes were the kind of breakfast that filled kitchens with warmth before the sun even cleared the trees. Cornmeal was mixed with boiling water until it formed a thick batter that could be shaped into small patties by hand. Each cake hissed as it touched the hot skillet, the edges browning to a perfect crisp, while the center stayed soft and tender. Families loved these because they required only a few pantry staples, yet tasted like a feast when served with butter or a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandparents remember the sound of sizzling cakes as a gentle morning alarm, calling everyone to the table. These cakes were hearty enough to keep field workers energized through the day and simple enough for children to help prepare. Whether eaten plain or split open to cradle a slice of fried fish from the night before, hot water cornbread cakes proved that true comfort often comes from the simplest ingredients and a steady hand at the skillet. Sweet potato biscuits added a gentle sweetness to the morning, making them a treasured treat for families across the South. Mashed sweet potatoes were folded into soft dough along with a spoonful of cane syrup and a touch of warm spices. As the biscuits baked, the natural sugars caramelized, creating a golden crust and a tender, moist interior. Served warm with butter or a smear of homemade jam, they filled kitchens with a scent that promised a comforting start to the day. Grandparents often saved leftover sweet potatoes from supper just to make these biscuits at dawn, stretching every ingredient while creating something that felt indulgent. Their vibrant color and subtle sweetness brightened even the simplest breakfast plates, pairing well with scrambled eggs or strong black coffee. These biscuits were a perfect example of resourceful cooking that turned farm harvests into something both nourishing and memorable, leaving a flavor that still lingers in family stories and worn recipe cards. Redeye gravy with country ham was a bold wake-up call that combined salty meat drippings with the sharp bite of black coffee. After thick slices of cured ham were seared in a cast-iron skillet, a splash of hot coffee was poured into the pan to release every bit of smoky flavor. The result was a thin, savory gravy that was spooned over grits or biscuits, adding a punch of flavor that jolted sleepy mornings to life. This dish reflected a no-waste mindset, where nothing from a prized ham went unused. Grandparents remember the rich aroma of coffee mingling with sizzling pork as a smell that meant breakfast was nearly ready. Served alongside eggs or even spooned over rice, Redeye gravy gave working families the hearty start they needed for long days in the fields or factories. It was simple, strong, and unforgettable, a dish that carried the warmth of tradition and the energy of early morning labor. Buttermilk hoe cakes were thin golden cornmeal pancakes that turned an everyday staple into a morning delight. A batter of cornmeal, buttermilk, and a little melted butter was poured onto a hot cast-iron griddle where it spread into crisp-edged rounds. The cakes cooked quickly, developing a toasty aroma that filled the kitchen and tempted everyone to grab one straight from the pan. Served with honey, cane syrup, or a pat of fresh butter, they offered a satisfying balance of tangy buttermilk and sweet corn. Families loved them because they were inexpensive, fast, and endlessly versatile, equally good with fried eggs or a bowl of stewed fruit. Grandparents recall how hoe cakes were often cooked outdoors on flat hoes or griddles over open fires during harvest seasons, a practical method that gave the cakes their name. Each bite carried the taste of tradition and the resourcefulness of cooks who knew how to turn simple ingredients into a breakfast worth remembering. Molasses pull bread brought a gentle sweetness to early mornings and delighted children who loved to tear off soft, sticky pieces while the loaf was still warm. The yeast dough was enriched with sorghum or blackstrap molasses, giving it a rich color and a deep, caramel-like flavor. After a slow rise, it was baked until the crust turned dark and slightly chewy, while the inside stayed moist and tender. Families treasured this bread because it required little more than patience and a steady hand, yet the reward was a fragrant loaf that could feed many. Grandparents remember how the scent of molasses would drift through the house, promising a breakfast that felt like a celebration even on an ordinary day. Slices were enjoyed plain, toasted or slathered with butter, making every bite a reminder of how sweet life could be when shared at the family table. Molasses pull bread remains a symbol of care and time, proof that the simplest ingredients can create the most lasting memories. Rice and eggs. Breakfast bowls turned yesterday's supper into a fresh and filling morning meal. Leftover rice was fried gently in butter until each grain glistened, then topped with softly scrambled eggs, seasoned with salt and a touch of black pepper. Sometimes bits of smoked sausage or garden vegetables were added for extra flavor, but the dish was satisfying even in its simplest form. Families appreciated how nothing went to waste and how this hearty bowl provided energy for a full day's work. Grandparents remember stirring the rice as it warmed, the smell of butter filling the air while eggs cooked slowly to a creamy finish. Served hot and eaten straight from the pan or in deep bowls, this breakfast was both practical and comforting. It was a favorite for busy households where mornings demanded quick, nourishing meals, and it continues to represent the ingenuity of cooks who turned leftovers into something new and delicious. Cathead biscuits with cane syrup earned their playful name from their impressive size, each biscuit as big as a cat's head. The dough was mixed by hand, using flour, lard, and buttermilk to create a texture both fluffy and sturdy enough to split and fill. Baked until golden brown, they emerged from the oven towering and fragrant. Grandparents remember serving them with thick drizzles of dark cane syrup or honey, a combination that balanced sweet and savory with every bite. These giant biscuits were a centerpiece of country breakfasts, capable of holding slices of fried ham or scrambled eggs without falling apart. Families loved how a single biscuit could satisfy even the hungriest farmhand, making them practical as well as indulgent. Their name sparked laughter and curiosity, ensuring they were always a conversation starter at the table. Today, the memory of Cathead biscuits remains a warm reminder of big flavors, generous hearts, and mornings filled with the smell of baking bread. Grits with cracklin bits brought a satisfying crunch to the creamy comfort of stone-ground corn. Grits were simmered slowly with water and a pinch of salt until they reached a silky texture, then enriched with crispy pieces of pork cracklings that added both flavor and texture. The rich aroma of rendering pork fat filled the kitchen, signaling a breakfast that promised warmth and sustenance. Families loved this dish because it turned inexpensive corn and leftover pork into something memorable and deeply satisfying. Grandparents recall how the cracklings popped in the pan, a sound that always brought children running to the stove. Served in deep bowls with a pat of butter, these grits provided lasting energy for long mornings of work in the fields or at the mill. Each spoonful carried a mix of creamy corn and smoky crunch, a combination that reflected the resourcefulness and creativity of cooks who knew how to make every ingredient shine. Field pea breakfast stew transformed humble peas into a nourishing start to the day. Fresh or dried field peas were simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a smoked ham hock until the broth turned rich and flavorful. Served over hot rice, the stew delivered protein and warmth that fueled hours of labor. Families valued it as a way to stretch ingredients while creating a meal that felt hearty and complete. Grandparents remember waking to the scent of peas simmering on the stove, a steady reminder that breakfast was already underway before dawn. The dish brought together garden harvests and cured meat, reflecting a tradition of combining what was fresh with what had been carefully preserved. It was a breakfast that filled bellies and lifted spirits, offering comfort in every spoonful. Today, field pea breakfast stew stands as a delicious tribute to the patience and skill of those who cooked with care and shared their tables with love. Fried ripe plantains brought a touch of Caribbean sweetness to Southern breakfasts, a flavor carried by migration and memory. Fully ripe plantains were sliced on the diagonal, their skins almost black to signal perfect sugar content. They were pan-fried in butter until their edges caramelized and their centers turned soft and custard-like. A sprinkle of brown sugar or a drizzle of cane syrup heightened the natural sweetness, making them irresistible alongside eggs or grits. Families cherished this dish for its tropical flair and the way it honored connections between African American and Caribbean kitchens. Grandparents recall how the scent of frying plantains would fill the house, a fragrance both exotic and familiar, tying generations to distant shores. Whether served alone as a treat or paired with savory dishes for contrast, fried ripe plantains turned an ordinary morning into something special. Their golden color and rich aroma still evoke memories of shared breakfasts and the enduring blend of cultures that shaped African American foodways. Carolina Gold rice cakes gave new life to leftover grains and turned yesterday's supper into a crisp morning treat. Cold rice was mixed with a little flour, a pinch of salt, and enough fresh egg to bind it together before being shaped into small patties. Each cake hissed as it met the hot cast-iron skillet, forming a golden crust that crackled with every bite. The inside stayed soft and nutty, a reminder of the prized Carolina Gold variety once grown across the coastal South. Families enjoyed these cakes with a drizzle of cane syrup or a spoonful of stewed fruit, creating a breakfast that felt both thrifty and indulgent. Grandparents remember how the aroma of frying rice cakes filled the house, and how children would sneak one from the pan before the rest were served. These cakes were proof that nothing from yesterday's meal ever went to waste, and that a simple handful of ingredients could deliver a breakfast as memorable as any feast. Hoppin John morning skillet brought together black-eyed peas, rice, and smoky meat for a dish that powered long days of labor. Dried peas were simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a ham hock until tender, then combined with fluffy rice in a single heavy pan. The flavors melded into a savory blend where each grain soaked up the rich broth. A sprinkle of fresh green onions brightened the skillet just before serving, adding a touch of freshness to the hearty meal. Families valued this breakfast for its affordability and the energy it provided, making it a favorite for farmers and dock workers facing dawn-to-dusk shifts. Grandparents recall stirring the pot before sunrise and letting the scent of peas and pork wake the household. Traditionally eaten for luck at New Year, it became a daily staple whenever a strong start was needed. Each spoonful carried both history and hope, a sustaining meal that remains a beloved memory of African American kitchens. Okra and tomato breakfast, hash turned garden vegetables into a colorful and hearty start to the day. Fresh okra was sliced into thin rounds and sautéed with ripe tomatoes, onions, and a pinch of black pepper until everything softened into a rich medley. The okra released its natural thickness, giving the dish a gentle stew-like consistency while still holding tender bites of vegetable. Served with hot cornbread or spooned over leftover rice, it offered both warmth and nourishment without requiring expensive ingredients. Grandparents remember gathering these vegetables from backyard plots at dawn, the dew still on the leaves as the skillet heated on the stove. The sweet acidity of tomatoes paired beautifully with the earthy flavor of okra, creating a combination that filled kitchens with a scent both bright and comforting. This breakfast hash celebrated the rhythm of the seasons and the importance of using what the garden gave, turning simple produce into a meal that lingered in memory long after the last bite. Sweet milk drop biscuits were the quick answer for mornings when time was short, but the craving for something warm and fresh never faded. Unlike traditional buttermilk biscuits, these were made with plain sweet milk, producing a delicate crumb and a subtle sweetness. The dough was mixed lightly by hand and dropped in rustic mounds onto a hot baking sheet, where each biscuit rose into a tender golden puff. Families prized them for their speed, needing no rolling or cutting, and for their ability to pair with anything from fried eggs to homemade jam. Grandparents recall how the smell of baking biscuits filled the kitchen in minutes, drawing sleepy children to the table. Served with cane syrup or a pat of butter, sweet milk drop biscuits turned even an ordinary morning into a small celebration. They remain a testament to the resourcefulness of cooks who could turn a few pantry staples into a breakfast that comforted the heart as much as the stomach. Sorghum syrup waffles brought a touch of indulgence to rural breakfasts where sweet treats were rare. Yeast batter was mixed the night before, allowing it to rise slowly until morning when it was poured onto heavy cast-iron waffle irons. The waffles emerged golden and fragrant, their deep pockets waiting to catch the thick, dark sorghum syrup that poured like liquid sunshine. Families treasured this meal as a special occasion breakfast, often reserved for Sundays or harvest celebrations. Grandparents recall the excitement of waking to the smell of batter hitting hot iron and the sound of syrup bubbling on the stove. The flavor was rich and earthy, with a sweetness distinct from cane sugar, offering a taste of the fields where sorghum stalks grew tall. Served with fresh butter or sliced fruit, these waffles were a reminder that even in lean times, moments of luxury and celebration could be found at the breakfast table with patience and a well-seasoned waffle iron. Fried fatback with hot biscuits delivered a salty crunch that anchored many southern mornings. Thin slices of pork fatback were fried until the edges curled and crisped, releasing a smoky aroma that filled the kitchen and promised a breakfast full of flavor. The rendered drippings were often saved to season vegetables or gravy, ensuring nothing went to waste. Served alongside large, soft biscuits and strong coffee, this simple meal provided the energy needed for a day of hard work in fields or factories. Grandparents remember the crackling sound of fatback in a hot skillet and the satisfaction of pairing each crispy piece with a bite of warm bread. The combination of salty meat and fluffy biscuits was both humble and deeply satisfying, turning the simplest ingredients into a morning ritual. Fried fatback stands as a symbol of thrift and creativity, a dish that transformed an inexpensive cut into something worthy of family gatherings and long-lasting memories. Apple and raisin fried pies were the portable breakfast treat that kept farmers and schoolchildren happy through long mornings. Diced apples and plump raisins were stewed with cinnamon and a hint of brown sugar until the filling turned syrupy and fragrant. Circles of pastry dough were filled with the mixture, folded into half moons and sealed before being fried to a golden crisp. Each bite offered a burst of warm fruit wrapped in a flaky shell that stayed delicious even hours after cooking. Families loved these hand pies for their convenience, as they could be packed into lunch pails or carried into the fields without spoiling. Grandparents recall the joy of finding one tucked into a pocket or basket, its sweet aroma a welcome surprise during a break from chores. Whether eaten warm from the skillet or cooled for later, these fried pies captured the sweetness of orchard harvests and the love of those who rose early to make them. Stewed apples with cinnamon grits created a comforting bowl that chased away the chill of early mornings. Tart apples were peeled, sliced, and simmered with a touch of butter, cinnamon, and a drizzle of cane syrup until tender and fragrant. Meanwhile, stone-ground grits cooked slowly on the stove, absorbing milk and a pinch of salt until they became smooth and creamy. The warm apples were spooned generously over the hot grits, their juices seeping into the grains and adding natural sweetness. Families adored this dish for its balance of hearty and sweet, a meal that nourished both body and spirit. Grandparents remember how the scent of apples and cinnamon filled the house, signaling a breakfast that felt like an embrace from the kitchen itself. Simple, filling, and full of harvest flavor, stewed apples with cinnamon grits remain a cherished memory of breakfasts built from what the orchard and mill provided, proof that comfort often comes from humble ingredients. Cabbage and onion hash cakes offered a savory way to begin the day while making excellent use of leftover vegetables. Shredded cabbage and diced onions were mixed with cornmeal, a beaten egg, and a touch of pepper to form sturdy patties. Pan-fried until crisp on the outside and tender inside, these cakes delivered both flavor and thrift. Families valued them for turning garden remnants into a hearty breakfast that could be paired with eggs or served alone. Grandparents recall the sizzle of the skillet and the sweet aroma of caramelizing onions as the cakes browned. Each bite offered a pleasing contrast of crunchy edges and soft centers, proving that simple vegetables could be as satisfying as any meat dish. Cabbage and onion hash cakes highlighted the resourcefulness of cooks who refused to waste a single leaf or bulb, turning necessity into culinary invention and leaving a memory of frugal yet flavorful breakfasts. Brown sugar rice porridge wrapped mornings in a blanket of warmth and sweetness. Leftover rice was simmered gently in milk until it softened further, creating a creamy base that welcomed spoonfuls of brown sugar or rich molasses. A pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg added just enough spice to fill the kitchen with a comforting aroma. Families loved this dish for its simplicity and its ability to stretch small amounts of rice into a filling breakfast that lingered with flavor. Grandparents remember how the steam rose from the pot on chilly mornings, promising a meal that was both nourishing and indulgent. Served in deep bowls with a pat of butter melting on top, brown sugar rice porridge was a gentle way to start the day, and a reminder that even the most basic ingredients can create something memorable. It remains a cherished recipe that speaks of thrift, love, and the power of turning leftovers into lasting comfort. Pork neckbone gravy over rice was the kind of breakfast that started with a simmer and ended with pure comfort. Meaty neckbones were browned in a heavy pot, then slow cooked with onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar until the meat turned tender and the broth thickened into a rich, savory gravy. That gravy was poured generously over a bowl of hot morning rice, soaking each grain with smoky depth. Families loved this dish because it transformed an inexpensive cut into a meal that tasted luxurious, stretching a few bones to feed everyone at the table. Grandparents remember how the aroma filled the house long before sunrise and how the gravy clung to every spoonful of rice, making it a filling start for a day of farm or factory work. It was food born from resourcefulness and patience, proof that time and care could elevate the simplest ingredients into something memorable. A breakfast that warmed hearts and kept bellies satisfied until well past noon. Creole shrimp and grits brought the flavors of the coastal South to early mornings when the catch was fresh and plentiful. Shrimp were sautéed with onions, bell peppers, and garlic before being simmered in a spicy tomato gravy brightened with a hint of lemon. Ladled over creamy stone ground grits, the dish combined silky texture with a punch of heat and brine. Families along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts prized this breakfast for its balance of nourishment and bold flavor, especially after a morning of fishing or shrimping. Grandparents recall waking to the sound of shrimp sizzling in the skillet, a signal that breakfast would be both hearty and unforgettable. Each spoonful blended the sweetness of the shrimp with the earthiness of the grits, creating a taste of tradition that carried the spirit of the sea straight to the table. Creole shrimp and grits remain a shining example of how African American cooks shaped coastal cuisine into something timeless and beloved. Sweet potato coffee cake filled kitchens with the warm scent of spices and slow-baked sweetness that felt like a gentle invitation to gather. Mashed sweet potatoes were blended into a rich batter seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a touch of clove before being baked until moist and tender. A crumbly topping of brown sugar and butter formed a delicate crust that contrasted beautifully with the soft cake beneath. Families treasured this recipe for its ability to use leftover sweet potatoes in a way that turned ordinary mornings into celebrations. Grandparents remember serving thick slices alongside strong coffee, the steam rising as the cake's golden surface cracked slightly under the knife. Each bite brought a comforting mix of earthy sweetness and spice, making it a favorite for Sunday mornings or special occasions. Sweet potato coffee cake stands as proof that simple harvest ingredients, when treated with care, can create a breakfast that lingers in memory long after the last crumb disappears. Fried green tomato sandwiches gave an unexpected twist to the morning table, transforming firm, unripe tomatoes into a crisp and tangy treat. Slices of green tomato were dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried until golden, their tart flavor mellowed by the heat. Layered on soft bread with homemade mayonnaise and a few fresh lettuce leaves, they made a sandwich that was both refreshing and satisfying. Families loved this dish when gardens overflowed with tomatoes that had not yet ripened, turning potential waste into a flavorful breakfast. Grandparents recall how the sizzle of tomatoes hitting hot oil signaled a meal worth getting up early for. The combination of crunchy crust, juicy tomato, and creamy spread offered a balance of textures and tastes that brightened even the sleepiest mornings. Fried green tomato sandwiches celebrate the ingenuity of cooks who saw possibility in every stage of the harvest, creating a breakfast that still surprises and delights today. Cornmeal mush with maple drizzle began as a humble stovetop porridge and ended as a crispy, caramelized delight. Cornmeal was slowly cooked with water and a pinch of salt until thick and smooth, then poured into a pan to cool overnight. By morning, it could be sliced into firm slabs and fried in butter until the edges turned golden and crisp. A warm drizzle of maple syrup added just enough sweetness to complement the toasty flavor of the corn. Families valued this dish for its economy and versatility, using leftover mush to create a breakfast that felt both hearty and special. Grandparents remember the hiss of butter in the skillet and the sweet aroma of syrup melting over the hot cakes. Each bite combined creamy interior with crunchy exterior, making it a comfort food that carried the essence of frugality and satisfaction in equal measure. Cornmeal mush with maple drizzle remains a testament to resourceful cooking and the pleasure of simple, well-made meals. Blackstrap molasses oatmeal offered a deep, mineral-rich sweetness that turned a simple bowl of oats into a memorable breakfast. Rolled oats were cooked slowly in milk until thick and creamy, then finished with a spoonful of dark molasses that gave the dish a bold, almost smoky flavor. The rich aroma filled the kitchen, wrapping the morning in warmth and comfort. Families loved this oatmeal not just for its taste, but for the nutrition it provided, as blackstrap molasses was known for its iron and calcium. Grandparents remember stirring the pot with a wooden spoon, watching the swirl of molasses create ribbons of dark caramel through the pale oats. Served with a pat of butter or a scattering of raisins, it was a breakfast that stuck with you through hours of work or school. Blackstrap molasses oatmeal was proof that wholesome ingredients could be indulgent, a dish that combined practicality with a flavor both hearty and unforgettable. Collard green and onion omelets turned fresh garden produce into a protein-rich breakfast that nourished both body and spirit. Tender collard greens were sautéed with onions and a pinch of garlic until soft and fragrant, then folded into fluffy beaten eggs. The mixture set gently in a well-seasoned skillet, producing a golden omelet with a savory filling that carried the essence of the garden. Families appreciated this meal for its balance of vegetables and protein, using whatever the backyard plot offered that season. Grandparents remember the sight of steam rising from the greens as the eggs puffed around them, a reminder of early mornings spent tending fields before breakfast. Served with hot biscuits or a slice of cornbread, the omelet delivered lasting energy and a taste of homegrown goodness. It remains a simple yet elegant dish, demonstrating how African-American cooks celebrated freshness and made every harvest a part of the morning feast. Peach cobbler breakfast bowls gave new purpose to leftover desserts, transforming them into a warm and fruity morning treat. Juicy peaches, already baked with sugar and spice from the night before, were spooned over split biscuits or a bowl of hot cereal. The syrupy juices soaked into the bread or grains, creating a sweet and comforting meal that needed no extra sugar. Families delighted in this dish because it turned yesterday's indulgence into today's quick breakfast, saving time and ingredients while offering a taste of celebration. Grandparents recall how the kitchen filled with the scent of peaches and cinnamon as the cobbler reheated, signaling a breakfast that felt like a gift. Each bite blended the soft fruit with the tender biscuits, making it both decadent and practical. Peach cobbler breakfast bowls remind us that nothing from the family table should ever be wasted when it can bring such joy the next morning. Fried sweet dough rolls were the forerunner to modern donuts, delivering a golden, airy bite that made mornings special. A yeasted dough was kneaded until smooth, allowed to rise, and then cut into small rounds or twists before being dropped into hot oil. As they fried, the rolls puffed and browned, filling the kitchen with a sweet, yeasty aroma. Once drained, they were dusted with sugar or brushed with a light glaze, creating a treat that children especially adored. Families loved these rolls for their ability to turn inexpensive flour and yeast into something that felt like a bakery indulgence. Grandparents remember the excitement of watching the dough bob and spin in the bubbling oil, knowing a warm roll was moments away. Served plain or with a drizzle of cane syrup, fried sweet dough rolls were a breakfast that felt festive even on an ordinary day, proving that joy could rise from the simplest ingredients. Homemade cane syrup sausage patties combined savory pork with the gentle sweetness of freshly boiled cane juice for a unique morning flavor. Ground pork was mixed with salt, cracked pepper, and a spoonful of dark cane syrup before being shaped into thick patties. As they sizzled in a hot skillet, the syrup caramelized, creating a glaze that sealed in juices and added a subtle sweetness to the meat. Families prized these sausages for their ability to turn basic pantry items into something both hearty and refined. Grandparents remember the way the kitchen filled with the aroma of caramelizing sugar and seasoned pork, a scent that brought everyone to the table before the patties were even finished. Served alongside biscuits or grits, they offered a perfect blend of sweet and savory, providing energy for a long day while satisfying every craving. Homemade cane syrup sausage patties remain a beloved memory of breakfasts that celebrated the harvest and the craft of careful cooking. Tell us which breakfast you would wake up early for. Drop it in the comments, tap like if these dishes made you hungry, and subscribe to keep these forgotten morning flavors alive.